Hello, friends. Tonight, we journey back to the very cradle of civilization, to the lands between the rivers, where myths were first etched in clay and whispered beneath the stars. This is Mesopotamia, ancient Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria, where towering ziggurats reached toward the heavens, and gods shaped the world with wind, water, and war. Before the Bible, before the pyramids, there were the stories of Tiamat and Apsu, of Inanna's descent, of Gilgamesh and Enkidu, of great floods and golden tablets, of divine kings and vengeful spirits. These tales were not just entertainment, they were survival, law, ritual, and prophecy. Over the next 25 chapters, we will trace the divine threads woven into everyday life. We'll meet gods who ruled the sky and underworld, priests who read omens in livers, kings who claimed the mandate of heaven, and ordinary people who looked to the stars for answers. So settle in. Let the river of myth carry you. As the lamplight flickers and the night deepens, we begin the story of Mesopotamian mythology, the first stories ever told.
Before the beginning, the primordial waters of Apsu and Tiamat. What existed before existence itself? Before the sun cleaved the day from the night? Before the land rose from the waters? Before the first human heart beat with fear and wonder? For the ancient peoples of Mesopotamia, the answer was not a void, not a silent emptiness. It was a state of infinite, undifferentiated potential, a cosmic soup of primordial energies embodied by two immense divine beings. This was the time before time, and its rulers were Apsu and Tiamat. Imagine Apsu. He is the first principle, the primal father. His name resonates with the concept of the abyss, but not an empty one. He is the vast subterranean ocean of fresh water that the Mesopotamians believed lay deep beneath the earth. This was a vital, life-giving force for them, the source of the rivers and wells that made their civilization possible in an otherwise arid land. Apsu represents stillness, quiescence, and a singular, unified state of being. He is the unexpressed potential, the quiet dream of creation, existing in a placid, eternal tranquility. In this pre-cosmic state, there is no form, no distinction, no action, only the pure, ungendered concept of freshwater existence. He is the idea before the word, the silence before the sound. Now imagine his counterpart, Tiamat. If Apsu is the calm, fresh water below, Tiamat is the tumultuous, roiling sea of salt water. Her name is linguistically related to the Semitic word for sea, Tum-Tu. She is the primal mother, a being of immense, chaotic power. Where Apsu is still, Tiamat is dynamic. She is the raging storm, the untamed ocean, the terrifying and fertile chaos from which all forms can emerge. She is the raw material of creation, the untamed wilderness of possibility. Together, Apsu and Tiamat constituted the totality of the universe. They were not husband and wife in the human sense, but two fundamental forces commingling. The Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, describes the state with poetic grandeur. When on high, the heaven had not been named. Firm ground below had not been called by name. Not but primordial Apsu, their begetter, and Tiamat, she who bore them all, their waters commingling as a single body. This commingling is the key. The fresh water of Apsu mixed with the salt water of Tiamat, an estuary on a cosmic scale. This was the moment of conception, the fusion of stasis and dynamism, potential and raw energy. From this union, a third entity sometimes mentioned is Mumu. Mumu is a difficult figure to define, often described as the vizier or advisor to Apsu. He can be seen as the word or the will of Apsu, the active principle that helps translate the potential of the primordial pair into the first stirrings of reality. He is the first logos, the ordering principle that begins to shape the chaos. This primordial triad, Apsu, Tiamat, and Mumu, existed in a delicate, fragile balance. It was a universe of pure potential, without consciousness as we know it, without conflict, and without progress. It was a perfect, silent whole. There were no stars to chart a course, no seasons to mark the passage of time, no land to stand upon. There was only the endless, swirling embrace of the fresh and salt waters, a womb of cosmic scale, pregnant with the future. This concept of a watery, chaotic beginning is not unique to Mesopotamia, but their version is profoundly tied to their environment. Living between the unpredictable Tigris and Euphrates, which could bring life-giving silt or devastating floods, and bordering the Persian Gulf, they saw the world through the lens of water's dual nature. Water was both the source of life and an agent of terrifying, destructive chaos. Apsu was the reliable, life-sustaining groundwater. Tiamat was the unpredictable, stormy sea. Their mythology was a direct reflection of their geography and their daily struggle for survival against the forces of nature. It is no wonder then that their creation story begins not with a creator god speaking light into existence from a void, but with a struggle within a pre-existing watery chaos. Creation, for the Babylonians, was not an act of making something from nothing, but an act of imposing order upon pre-existing, powerful, and dangerous forces. It was a war against chaos. And that war was about to begin. The perfect, silent tranquility of Apsu and Tiamat's commingling waters could not last. Within their cosmic womb, something new was stirring. New beings, born of their union, were about to erupt into existence. These new beings would be different. They would be loud. They would be active. They would be defined. And their very existence would shatter the primordial silence, threatening the very nature of their parents, and setting in motion a divine conflict that would tear the universe apart, only to rebuild it anew. The age of silent potential was over. The age of the gods was about to begin.
The birth of the gods, Lamu, Lahamu, Anshar, Kishar, and the rise of a new generation. From the sacred commingling of Apsu's fresh water and Tiamat's salt sea, the first generations of gods were born. They were not created by a conscious act of will, but rather emerged as natural products of the primordial fusion, like silt forming in an estuary. These were the first movements away from undifferentiated unity and towards complexity and individuality. The Enuma Elish describes this process as a gradual emergence, a slow unfurling of divinity. The very first pair to emerge were Lamu and Lahamu. Their names are thought to mean hairy one, or perhaps relate to mud and sediment, representing the first stage of separation from the watery chaos, the formation of silt, the first hint of solid ground. They are often depicted as serpentine or draconic figures, guardians of the temple of Enki and Eridu, but in the creation epic, their primary role is simply to exist, to be the first step in a divine genealogy. They are more abstract principles than fully fledged personalities, representing a stage of development, a transition from the purely elemental to the divine. They existed for eons, the text tells us, growing in age and stature, but they remained largely indistinct, a bridge between the old world and the new. Anshar and Kishar, in turn, gave birth to the next generation. And here we meet the gods who would truly shape the destiny of Mesopotamia. Their firstborn was Anu, or An in Sumerian, the god of the high heavens, the sky itself. Anu inherited the celestial domain from his father, Anshar, but he was a more defined and active deity. He was the source of divine authority, the king of the gods, who resided in the highest celestial realm. His word was law, and he was the ultimate arbiter of disputes among the divinities. Anu then fathered a son who would prove to be one of the most crucial figures in the entire Mesopotamian pantheon, Nudimmud, better known by his Sumerian name Enki, or his Akkadian name Ea. The epic describes him as surpassing his fathers, a being of immense wisdom and cunning. Ea was the god of magic, craftsmanship, intelligence, and, fittingly, the fresh waters of the Apsu from which his great-great-grandfather was formed. He was the divine trickster, the master artisan, the problem solver of the gods. While Anu ruled from on high with authority, Ea operated with cleverness and ingenuity. He was the god who understood the workings of the universe, the divine engineer who could shape reality through his wisdom. This new generation of gods, Anu, Ea, and their siblings, was fundamentally different from their primordial ancestors. They were not silent, formless beings. They were vibrant, energetic, and most importantly, loud. The Enuma Elish paints a vivid picture of their behavior. The divine brothers gathered together. They disturbed Tiamat as they surged back and forth. Indeed, they disturbed the belly of Tiamat by their dancing. They were boisterous, filled with the energy of creation. Their laughter, their arguments, their dancing, and their very presence created a clamor that echoed through the cosmos. This noise became the catalyst for the first cosmic war. For Apsu, the father of the deep, this endless racket was an abomination. It was a violation of the primordial tranquility he embodied. The energy and dynamism of his descendants were a direct assault on his fundamental nature, which was stillness and silence. The epic tells us their ways were loathsome to him. He could not diminish their clamor, so Apsu called to Mumu, his vizier, "O Mumu, who gratifies my spirit, let us go to Tiamat." Apsu, with Mumu's encouragement, decided on a horrific course of action. He would destroy his own offspring to restore the silence he craved. He presented his plan to Tiamat, the Great Mother. But Tiamat, despite also being disturbed, was horrified by the idea. She was their mother. Her chaotic nature was perhaps more tolerant of their boisterousness. "How could we destroy that which we have brought into being?" she cried. "Their ways are indeed very grievous, but let us bear with them patiently." Tiamat, the embodiment of chaos, ironically argued for patience and tolerance. Apsu, the embodiment of order and stillness, argued for annihilation. But Apsu would not be swayed. The plan was set. However, the all-wise Ea, the master of magic and intellect, overheard their plotting. He did not confront his great-great-grandfather with force, but with cunning. Using his mastery of magic, Ea crafted a powerful spell, an artfully constructed, holy and sublime incantation. He recited this spell over the waters, and it caused Apsu to fall into a deep, death-like slumber. While the primordial father was incapacitated, Ea took his crown, his mantle of radiance, and put it on himself. He then slew Apsu and established his own dwelling, a holy shrine upon the body of the vanquished god of the deep. He also captured Apsu's Azir, Mumu, holding him by a nose rope. This act was monumental. The younger generation, led by the clever Ea, had defeated the old order. Ea, the god of fresh water, now literally lived upon the abyss, mastering the domain of his ancestor. In this new home, which he named Apsu, a place of cosmic significance, his son would be born. This was no ordinary god. This was Marduk. The Enuma Elish hails praise upon his birth. In the chamber of fates, the house of destinies, a god was engendered, most able and wisest of gods. In the heart of the holy Apsu was Marduk created.
The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic unpacked. The dramatic story of Apsu, Tiamat, and the birth of the gods is not some vague oral tradition pieced together by modern scholars. It comes to us from one of the most important literary works of the ancient world, a 7-tablet epic known as the Enuma Elish. The name itself is taken from its opening words, "when on high," immediately setting a cosmic scene. This text is our single most important source for understanding the Babylonian worldview, their theology, and their vision of creation. But to truly understand the myths, we must first understand the document that contains them. The Enuma Elish is, on the surface, a creation myth. It tells the story of how the universe came to be, how the gods were born, how the world was formed from the body of a slain monster, and how humanity was created to serve the divine. It is a foundational text, a scripture that explains the origins of everything the Babylonians knew and experienced. The epic was written in Akkadian, a Semitic language using the cuneiform script developed by the earlier Sumerians. While fragments and earlier versions of these stories existed, the standard, most complete version we have today dates back to the late 2nd millennium BCE, likely during the reign of Nebuchadnezzar I, though it was certainly finalized and canonized during the Neo-Babylonian period. This epic was not merely a story to be read in private. It was a living, breathing part of Babylonian religious life. Its most important function was liturgical. The Enuma Elish was publicly recited in its entirety over several days during the Akitu festival, the Babylonian New Year celebration held each spring. This was the most significant religious festival of the year, a time of cosmic renewal. As the natural world was reborn with the spring floods and new crops, the recitation of the creation epic ritually reenacted the original ordering of the universe. It was a way of resetting the cosmos, reaffirming divine order and ensuring the stability and prosperity of Babylon for the coming year. By chanting the story of creation, the Babylonians believed they were actively participating in the maintenance of that creation, warding off the ever-present threat of a return to primordial chaos. But the Enuma Elish is far more than just a religious text. It is also a masterful piece of political and theological propaganda. The entire narrative is meticulously constructed to lead to one inevitable conclusion: the supremacy of Marduk, the patron god of the city of Babylon. In earlier Sumerian and Akkadian myths, the king of the gods was typically the sky god Anu, or the powerful storm god Enlil. The Enuma Elish is a deliberate and brilliant rewriting of this divine hierarchy. The epic systematically sidelines the older, more established deities. Anu is portrayed as hesitant and ineffective. Ea, Enki, despite his cleverness in dispatching Apsu, is shown to be powerless against the fury of aroused Tiamat. All the elder gods are rendered impotent in the face of this new threat. A cosmic power vacuum is created, which only one god can fill: the young, dynamic, and all-powerful Marduk of Babylon. The story becomes a divine resume for Marduk, proving his worthiness to rule not just Babylon, but the entire cosmos. His victory over Tiamat is not just a battle, it is a divine mandate. By defeating the ultimate force of chaos, he earns the right to kingship over all other gods. They willingly cede their powers to him, proclaiming his 50 names,
each one describing a different aspect of his supreme authority. This has a direct parallel on Earth. By elevating Marduk to the pinnacle of the pantheon, the city of Babylon is simultaneously elevated to the position of the preeminent city in Mesopotamia. The epic serves as a divine charter for Babylonian imperialism. If Marduk is king of the gods, then Babylon is the center of the universe, the terrestrial counterpart to his celestial throne. The laws of Babylon are the laws of the cosmos, and the king of Babylon rules as Marduk's chosen representative on earth. The Enuma Elish therefore legitimized Babylonians' political dominance in religious terms, arguing that its rise to power was not a matter of historical accident or military might, but a divinely ordained cosmic destiny. The structure of the epic itself, across 7 clay tablets, is deliberate. 7 was a number of cosmic significance, representing completion and perfection. The narrative progresses from chaos to order, culminating in the establishment of a stable, hierarchical cosmos under Marduk's rule.
The Sumerian pantheon: An, Enlil, Enki, and Ninhursag. Before the rise of Babylon and the ascendancy of Marduk, another civilization laid the mythological groundwork of Mesopotamia. These were the Sumerians, a non-Semitic people who inhabited the southern part of the land between the rivers from at least the 4th millennium BCE. They invented writing, the wheel, and the city-state, and they conceived of a pantheon of gods that would be worshipped, adapted, and reinterpreted for the next 3,000 years. While the Babylonian Enuma Elish presents a specific, politically motivated version of the cosmos, the older Sumerian myths provide a broader, more foundational view of the divine world, ruled by a core group of powerful deities. At the apex of this pantheon was a ruling triad of gods, each with dominion over a fundamental realm of the universe. The first of these was An, whose name simply means sky in Sumerian. He was the original source of all divine authority, the great patriarch of the gods, and the king of heaven. He was a remote and ancient figure, analogous to the Greek Uranus. An resided in the highest celestial realm, and was seen as the ultimate arbiter, the one who decreed the fates and bestowed kingship on both gods and mortals. However, like many sky fathers in mythology, he was often distant and passive. While his authority was absolute, the day-to-day governance of the cosmos often fell to his more active and dynamic son. This son was Enlil, perhaps the most important and powerful deity in the Sumerian pantheon for much of their history. His name means Lord Wind, or Lord of the Air. He ruled the realm between the sky and the earth, the atmosphere, the winds, and the storms. He was a god of immense and often terrifying power. Enlil was the one who executed the decrees of his father, An. He was the force that could bring the life-giving spring rains or the destructive floods. His main temple, the Ekur, or mountain house, in the city of Nippur, was considered the religious center of Sumer, the literal and symbolic bond between heaven and earth. Enlil was not always benevolent. He was often portrayed as stern, irascible, and at times hostile to humanity. In the Sumerian flood myth, it is Enlil who, annoyed by the noise of mankind, decides to wipe them out with a deluge. He was the embodiment of divine power in its most untamed and arbitrary form, a force to be feared and respected in equal measure. He held the tablet of destinies before it was ever conceived of being in the hands of Marduk or Kingu. He was the true king of the gods in the Sumerian mind. The third member of this core group was the brilliant and beloved Enki, known as Ea to the Akkadians and Babylonians.
His name likely means Lord of the Earth, but his primary domain was the Absu, the freshwater abyss beneath the earth, which made him the god of waters, wisdom, and magic, and creation. While An was distant and Enlil was powerful, Enki was clever, cunning, and generally a friend to humanity. He was the master craftsman, the divine artisan who knew the secrets of the universe. It was Enki who organized the world, assigning duties to the other gods and creating the patterns of civilization. He was the keeper of the Me, pronounced Me, the divine decrees or universal laws that governed all aspects of existence, from kingship and priesthood to weaving and smithing. Enki was a quintessential trickster figure and a culture hero. In numerous myths, he foils the harsh plans of the other gods, particularly Enlil. It is Enki who, in the Sumerian and Akkadian flood stories, secretly warns the human hero, Ziusudra, or Utnapishtim, and gives him the instructions to build an ark, thus saving humanity from Enlil's wrath. He was the god one turned to for solutions, for knowledge, and for help. His city, Eridu, was considered by the Sumerians to be the very first city in the world, the place where civilization began, fitting for the home of the god of wisdom. The contrast between Enlil and Enki is central to Mesopotamian thought. The conflict between raw, arbitrary power, Enlil, and cunning, technical intelligence, Enki. Along this ruling male triad stood a fourth immensely important figure, the great mother goddess Nin-Hursag. Her name means Lady of the Sacred Mountain, and she went by many other names, including Nintu, Lady of Birth, and Ki, Earth. She was the primary goddess of fertility, nature, and childbirth. If the male gods represented the great cosmic realms, Nin-Hursag represented the fertile earth itself, the mountains and the teeming life of the plains. She was the divine midwife, the one who shaped the first humans from clay and breathed life into them. She was a co-creator with Enki, a powerful and independent deity in her own right, representing the raw, generative power of the earth. Together, these four, An, Enlil, Enki, and Nin-Hursag, formed the Big Four, the cornerstones of the Sumerian cosmos. Below them existed a vast and complex pantheon of other deities, the Anunnaki, offspring of An, and the Igigi, a group of younger celestial gods. These included figures who would become central to later mythologies. There was Nana, later the Akkadian Sin, the god of the moon, whose city was Ur. His son was the great sun god, Utu, who was also the god of justice, seeing all that happened on earth during the day. And then there was Utu's twin sister, a goddess who would become one of the most complex, enduring, and powerful deities in the ancient world, the goddess of love, war, and the planet Venus, the queen of heaven, Inanna. The Sumerian pantheon was not a static system. It was a dynamic reflection of the political landscape. Each city-state had its own patron deity, and as the fortunes of a city rose, so too did the prominence of its god. The rise of Nippur established Enlil's supremacy. The importance of Eridu highlighted Enki. Later, when the city of Babylon came to dominate Mesopotamia, its patron god Marduk, a previously minor deity, would be thrust into the spotlight. The Babylonian priests and scribes, in writing the Enuma Elish, cleverly integrated Marduk into the existing Sumerian framework. They made him the son of Enki, Ea, giving him a noble lineage, and then engineered a cosmic crisis that only he could solve, thus justifying his usurpation of Enlil's role as king of the gods. Understanding the Sumerian pantheon is, therefore, crucial. It is the original source code, the foundational structure upon which all subsequent Mesopotamian mythology was built, adapted, and rewritten.
Inanna, Ishtar, goddess of love, war, and the morning star. Among the sprawling pantheon of Mesopotamian gods, one figure stands out for her fierce complexity, her insatiable ambition, and her profound influence. She is a goddess of shocking contradictions, a divine being who embodies the most powerful and volatile forces of human existence: love and war, creation and destruction, sensuality and violence. To the Sumerians, she was Inanna, the queen of heaven. To the later Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, she was Ishtar. But by any name, she was one of the most revered and feared deities of the ancient world. Inanna's domain was not a single stable cosmic realm like the sky or the deep. Instead, she embodied dynamic, transitional, and often violent energies. Her primary association was with sexual love and procreation. She was the goddess of desire, passion, and carnal pleasure. Hymns praise her as the holy courtesan, celebrating her beauty and allure. She was not a goddess of marriage or domesticity. Her love was untamed, passionate, and often extramarital. She took many lovers, both divine and mortal, and her myths are filled with her erotic exploits. This aspect of her character was vital to the world. It was her sexual power that ensured the fertility of the land, the reproduction of animals, and the continuation of the human race. The sacred marriage rite, in which the king of a city would symbolically marry a high priestess representing Inanna, was believed to guarantee a year of abundance and prosperity for the entire land. But this goddess of love was, in the same breath, a terrifying warrior. She was the goddess of battle, strife, and conflict. Art depicts her not only in beautiful robes, but also in full battle dress, armed with a bow, quiver, and axe, often with weapons bristling from her shoulders. A lion, the symbol of ferocious power, was her sacred animal and often accompanied her. She was said to rejoice in the din of battle, to smash heads like a pestle, and to wade through the blood of her enemies. Kings would invoke her name before a campaign, seeking her blessing to ensure a bloody and decisive victory. She was not a goddess of strategic warfare, like the Greek Athena, but a goddess of the sheer unbridled fury and violence of combat. How could one deity embody such two polar opposite concepts? For the Mesopotamians, this was not a contradiction. Love and war were two sides of the same coin. Both are domains of intense, passionate, and often chaotic emotion that can overwhelm reason. Both involve a stripping away of social norms, a submission to primal instincts. Both can be creative and destructive. Inanna ruled over this raw, untamed spectrum of human experience. She was the force that drove a person to acts of both passionate love and passionate violence. Her third major domain was astral. She was the personification of the planet Venus, the morning and evening star. As the morning star, she was a warrior, heralding the coming of the sun god, her brother, Utu or Shamash. As the evening star, she was the goddess of love and sensuality, appearing as the world prepared for the intimacy of the night. Her celestial nature linked her to the heavens and gave her a cosmic dimension beyond the purely terrestrial concerns of love and war. Her movements in the sky were watched closely by diviners, as they were believed to signal her shifting moods and intentions, portending either peace and prosperity or strife and conflict on earth.
Inanna was defined by her ambition. She was never content with the power she had. A central myth, Inanna and Enki, tells the story of her journey to the city of Eridu to visit her wise father, or great-uncle, depending on the tradition, Enki. Enki, the keeper of the Me, the fundamental principles of civilization, welcomes her, and they engage in a great feast and drinking contest. As Enki becomes more and more intoxicated, Inanna, with her charm and cunning, coaxes him into giving her the Me. One by one, he bestows upon her over 100 of these sacred decrees, including kingship, priesthood, justice, warfare, artistry, and even the desecration of cities and the kindling of strife. Sobering up the next morning, Enki is horrified to discover what he has done and sends monstrous guardians to retrieve the Me. But Inanna, a skilled pilot of her boat of heaven, successfully fights them off and brings the Me back in triumph to her own city of Uruk. This myth is crucial. It explains how Uruk became a center of civilization, but more importantly, it reveals Inanna's core character. She is not a passive recipient of power. She is an active, ambitious acquirer of it. She uses her intellect, her charm, and her ferocity to expand her dominion. She is a disruptor in the pantheon, a force of change who challenges the established order. She is not content to simply be the goddess of love. She wants to be the goddess of everything that matters. This ambition would ultimately lead her to her most famous and perilous journey, a quest to conquer the one realm that was not yet hers, the domain of death itself. Her insatiable desire for power would drive her to descend into the underworld, a journey from which no one, not even a god, was meant to return. Inanna Ishtar's influence was immense and long-lasting. She was arguably the most popular deity in Mesopotamia for much of its history. Her cult spread throughout the ancient Near East. She was identified with the Canaanite Astarte, the Syrian Artargetis, and would later heavily influence the Greek goddess Aphrodite, and to a certain extent Artemis. Her dual nature as a figure of love and war, her celestial associations, and her complex, assertive personality made her a figure of enduring fascination. She represented a vision of the feminine that was not merely maternal or domestic, but was powerful, independent, autonomous, and dangerous. She was a civilizing force who brought the Med to her city, and a chaotic force who reveled in battle. She was the patron of prostitutes and the champion of kings. Inanna was the embodiment of life in all its beautiful, passionate, and brutal complexity.
The Descent of Inanna, Death, Resurrection, and the Underworld. The Descent of Inanna, Death, Resurrection, and the Underworld. No story reveals the raw, terrifying power of Mesopotamian myth, nor the ambition of its greatest goddess more than the descent of Inanna. This is not merely a tale of adventure. It is a profound exploration of life, death, power, and sacrifice. It is the story of Inanna's quest to conquer the final frontier, the one domain that held itself above all others, the land of no return, the underworld, known to the Sumerians as Ker. The story begins with a bold and unexplained decision. Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, the ruler of the great city of Uruk, decides to abandon her temples and her earthly domain to journey to the underworld. Her motives are never explicitly stated, but they are implied by her character. It is an act of cosmic ambition. The underworld is ruled by her older sister, the grim and formidable Ereshkigal, Queen of the Great Below. Inanna's journey is a power grab, an attempt to extend her dominion over the realm of the dead. Knowing the extreme danger of her quest, Inanna prepares meticulously. Before she leaves, she instructs her faithful vizier, Ninshubur, on what to do if she does not return. Ninshubur is to mourn for her,
to dress in sackcloth and to go to the great gods for help. First, she must appeal to Enlil in Nippur. If he refuses, she must go to Nana, the moon god, in Ur. If he too refuses, she must make her final appeal to the wise and cunning Enki in Eridu, for he knows the food of life, he knows the water of life. He will surely bring me back to life. With her contingency plan in place, Inanna adorns herself in her most powerful regalia. She places the crown of the steppe on her head, wears lapis lazuli beads around her neck, a breastplate on her chest, a golden ring on her waist, and wraps herself in her royal robe. These are not mere ornaments, they are the symbols and sources of her divine power. Thus armed, she descends to the gates of the underworld. At the first gate, she is met by the chief gatekeeper, Neti. When he asks her purpose, she declares she has come to witness the funeral rites of Gugalanna, the bull of heaven, the husband of her sister, Ereshkigal. This is likely a pretext. Ereshkigal, from her throne deep within the earth, is immediately suspicious and angry. She sees this as an invasion. She instructs Meti to allow Inanna to enter, but only according to the unalterable laws of the underworld. And so the stripping begins. At each of the 7 gates of Kur, Inanna is forced to remove one piece of her regalia. At the first gate, her crown is taken. At the second, her lapis lazuli beads. At the third, her breastplate, and so on, until at the 7th and final gate, her royal robe is removed, and she enters the throne room of Ereshkigal, completely naked and powerless. Her divine power, her identity as Queen of Heaven, has been systematically dismantled. She is reduced to mere mortal soul. Ereshkigal, seated on her throne, is a figure of terrifying authority. With her are the 7 judges of the underworld, the Anunnaki. They pass their judgment on the stripped and humbled Inanna. They fastened their eyes upon her, the eyes of death. Ereshkigal herself uttered a cry of guilt against her, and Inanna, the great Queen of Heaven, was turned into a corpse, a piece of rotting meat, and was hung on a hook on the wall. The goddess of life was dead. 3 days and 3 nights pass. On the surface of the earth, Ninshubur, seeing that her mistress has not returned, enacts the plan. She goes to Enlil, but the great storm god refuses to help, arguing that Inanna brought this upon herself by breaking the cosmic rules. Who, having entered the underworld, can expect to leave, he asks. Ninshubur then goes to the moon god, Nanna, who also refuses for the same reason. The established order of the cosmos cannot be violated, even for the beloved goddess. Finally, Ninshubur goes to Enki in Eridu. The wise god of water and creation is deeply grieved. Unlike the others, he is not bound by rigid rules, but by clever solutions. He does not challenge the laws of the underworld directly, he circumvents them. From the dirt under his fingernails, Enki creates 2 small, sexless creatures, the Kurgara and the Galatur. They are not truly alive in the mortal sense, and therefore can enter and leave the underworld unharmed. He gives them the food of life and the water of life, and instructs them to go to Ereshkigal. The 2 creatures slip like flies past the gatekeeper, and find Ereshkigal in the throes of agony. The myth describes her as moaning with the cries of a woman giving birth. She is in pain, suffering for the death she has inflicted. The Kurgara and the Galatur do not demand anything. Instead, they empathize with her. When she groans, "Oh, my inside," they groan with her. When she cries, "Oh, my outside," they cry with her. This act of compassion touches the grim queen. Grateful for their sympathy, Ereshkigal offers them a gift, anything they desire. They ask only for the corpse hanging on the hook. Bound by her own word, she agrees. The creatures sprinkled the food of life and the water of life on Inanna's body, and she is resurrected. But the laws of the underworld are absolute. No one can leave the land of no return without providing a substitute. As the resurrected Inanna ascends, she is accompanied by the Dala, the bailiffs or demons of the underworld,
who cling to her, demanding a replacement. They first encounter her vizier, Ninshebur. The demons want to take her, but Inanna furiously refuses. Ninshebur was her loyal servant who saved her. They move on to other cities, where they find two of Inanna's minor servant gods, Shara and Lulal, also grieving for her. She protects them as well. Finally, they arrive back to her great city of Uruk, and there, seated on a magnificent throne, dressed in fine robes, is her husband, Dumuzi the Shepherd King. He is not mourning, he is enjoying his new position of power. Seeing his lack of grief, his betrayal, Inanna's heart turns cold. She looks at him with the eye of death, the very same gaze the judges of the underworld had fixed on her. She points to him and says to the demons, "Take him, take Dumuzi." The demon sees the terrified king, though he pleads for his life and is temporarily transformed into a snake by the sun god Utu. He is eventually captured and dragged down to the underworld to take Inanna's place. The story ends with a compromise brokered by Dumuzi's devoted sister, Geshtinanna. She offers to take his place for half the year. And so it is decreed, Dumuzi will spend 6 months in the underworld, and Geshtinanna will spend the other 6 months. This resolution provides the mythological basis for the changing of the seasons. When Dumuzi, the god of fertility and growth, is in the underworld, the earth becomes barren and dry. When he returns, life and greenery are restored. The Descent of Inanna is a multi-layered masterpiece. It is a story of ambition and its consequences, a stark warning about overstepping boundaries. It is a journey of death and rebirth, a symbolic passage through which the goddess gains new wisdom and power over the realm of the dead. And it is a powerful etiological myth explaining the cyclical nature of life and death in the agricultural world. It is the archetype for countless dying and rising god myths, a testament to the Mesopotamian grappling with the ultimate mysteries of existence.
The Epic of Gilgamesh: Immortality, Friendship, and Loss. If the Enuma Elish is the Mesopotamian story of the cosmos, then the Epic of Gilgamesh is the Mesopotamian story of what it means to be human. Widely regarded as the first great masterpiece of world literature, this epic poem predates Homer's Iliad and Odyssey by at least 1,500 years. It is a profound, sprawling narrative that wrestles with the most fundamental questions of the human condition: the nature of friendship, the clash between civilization and the wild, the arrogance of power, and above all, the terrifying finality of death and the desperate, futile search for immortality. The story revolves around its titular hero, Gilgamesh, the king of the great city of Uruk. Gilgamesh is no ordinary mortal. He is described as 2/3 god and 1/3 man, blessed by the deities with immense strength, courage, and beauty. He is a builder of great walls, a mighty warrior, and a king of unparalleled stature. But in the beginning, he is also a terrible tyrant. His divine heritage has made him arrogant and cruel. He oppresses his people, exhausts the young men with endless labor and games, and claims the right to sleep with every bride on her wedding night, the droit du seigneur. The people of Uruk cry out to the gods for relief from their insufferable king. The gods hear their plea. The great mother goddess Aruru, another name for Ninhursag, is tasked with creating a match for Gilgamesh, a rival who can temper his wild energy. She takes a pinch of clay, moistens it with her spit, and forms a new being, Enkidu, the wild man. Enkidu is the polar opposite of the cultured, urban Gilgamesh. He is born in the wilderness, his body is covered in matted hair, and he lives among the animals. He is innocent of civilization, drinking from water holes with the gazelles and freeing animals from trappers' snares. He is nature personified, a perfect mirror to Gilgamesh's hyper-civilized tyranny. The journey of Enkidu from wild man to civilized companion is a story in itself, but his destiny is intertwined with Gilgamesh. When they finally meet in the streets of Uruk, they engage in a furious wrestling match, a titanic struggle between two equals. Gilgamesh, for the first time in his life, meets his match. Though Gilgamesh ultimately prevails, the fight does not end in enmity. Instead, it forges an unbreakable bond of friendship between them. They embrace, and from that moment on, they are inseparable companions. Enkidu's friendship channels Gilgamesh's restless energy away from oppressing his people and towards heroic adventure. Together, they embark on a grand quest to the legendary cedar forest in the west, a place forbidden to mortals, to slay its monstrous guardian, Humbaba. Their motives are a mixture of a desire for fame, a need to test their strength, and a quasi-pious goal of ridding the world of an ancient evil. Despite warnings from the elders of Uruk and the gods themselves, they journey to the forest. After a terrifying battle, they succeed in killing the monster, an act of supreme hubris that angers the god Enlil, who had appointed Humbaba as the forest's guardian. Their fame now reaches the heavens. The goddess Ishtar, Inanna, seeing the heroic Gilgamesh in his glory, is filled with desire and proposes marriage to him. But Gilgamesh, aware of her fickle nature and the terrible fates that befell her previous lovers, scornfully rejects him, listing her past cruelties. Ishtar is enraged by this insult. She flies to her father, Anu, and demands that he unleash the Bull of Heaven, a colossal, destructive beast, to punish Gilgamesh and destroy Uruk. Anu reluctantly agrees, and the bull descends, causing widespread devastation. But once again, the two heroes, Gilgamesh and Enkidu, fight together and manage to slay the divine beast. In a final act of defiance, Enkidu tears off the bull's hind leg and hurls it at the face of the furious goddess. This act seals his fate. The gods convene a council. They cannot kill Gilgamesh, for he is part divine and protected, but his mortal companion has gone too far. Enlil, angered by the death of Humbaba, and Ishtar, insulted by the slaying of her bull, demand justice. The gods decree that Enkidu must die. Enkidu is stricken with a mysterious illness. He lies on his sickbed for 12 days, his strength failing him. In his final moments, he has a terrifying dream of the underworld, a house of dust where souls sit in darkness, eating clay and dressed like birds with feathers. He describes this bleak, gloomy afterlife to Gilgamesh, and then he dies. The death of Enkidu shatters Gilgamesh. He is consumed by a grief so profound it borders on madness. He weeps for 7 days and 7 nights, refusing to allow his friend to be buried, hoping his lament can bring him back to life. But when a maggot falls from Enkidu's nostril, the terrible reality of death finally sinks in. Gilgamesh's grief then transforms into a new and far more profound emotion: terror. If Enkidu, his equal, his other half, could die, then he too, Gilgamesh, must someday die. When I die, will I not be like Enkidu? He asks himself. Sorrow has entered my heart. I am afraid of death. This fear launches Gilgamesh on his second and far more profound quest, the search for immortality. He abandons his city, his throne, and his fine clothes, donning animal skins and wandering into the wilderness. He seeks the one man known to have escaped mortality, Utnapishtim, the survivor of the Great Flood,
who was granted immortality by the gods. His journey is long and perilous. He battles lions, crosses impassable mountains guarded by scorpion beings, and travels through 12 leagues of absolute darkness. Finally, he reaches the edge of the world and the waters of death, which no mortal can cross. With the help of the ferryman Urshanabi, he manages to make the crossing and at last comes face to face with Utnapishtim, the distant. Gilgamesh pours out his story of grief and fear and begs for the secret of eternal life. But Utnapishtim offers no easy answers. He tells Gilgamesh the story of the Great Flood, explaining that his own immortality was a unique, unrepeatable gift from the gods. To prove to Gilgamesh that he is unfit for eternal life, which requires eternal wakefulness, Utnapishtim challenges him to stay awake for 7 days. Gilgamesh, exhausted from his journey, immediately falls asleep. As a final, compassionate gesture, Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh of a magical plant that grows at the bottom of the sea, a plant that can restore youth. Gilgamesh ties stones to his feet, sinks to the bottom of the Apsu, and retrieves the plant. He is jubilant, planning to take it back to Uruk and share it with the old men of his city. But on his journey home, while he stops to bathe in a pool of cool water, a snake smells the plant's fragrance, steals it, and sheds its skin, becoming young again. In that moment, Gilgamesh is utterly defeated. He sits down and weeps. He has failed. Immortality is not for him. He returns to Uruk with the ferryman Urshanabi, empty-handed. But as he approaches his city, something inside him changes. He looks upon the massive walls he once built, the temples, the marketplaces, the foundations of the civilization he created, and points them out to Urshanabi, not with the arrogance of a tyrant, but with the quiet pride of a wise king. He has not found eternal life, but he has found a different kind of immortality, the lasting legacy of his work, his city, and his story. The Epic of Gilgamesh is a journey from tyrannical god-king to wise and mortal man, a story that still resonates with anyone who has ever loved, lost, and contemplated their own place in the vastness of time.
Enkidu, the wild man, and his civilizing journey. In the grand tapestry of the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero himself may hold the title, but it is the character of Enkidu who represents the story's soul. He is more than a sidekick or a foil. He is the catalyst for Gilgamesh's transformation and the embodiment of one of the epic's central themes, the complex and often painful relationship between nature and civilization. His personal journey, from a wild beast man to a civilized hero, is a powerful myth in its own right, a story about what is gained and what is lost in the process of becoming human. Enkidu's origin is a direct answer to the tyranny of Gilgamesh. While Gilgamesh is a product of the city, of culture, and of divine lineage, Enkidu is born of the raw, untamed earth. The mother goddess Aruru creates him from clay in the wilderness, the Edin, or steppe. The epic describes his state of nature vividly. His body was covered with shaggy hair. He had the long hair of a woman. He knew neither people nor land. He is a being of pure instinct, living in perfect harmony with the animal kingdom. He eats grass with the gazelles and drinks from their waterholes. He is their protector, filling in hunters' pits and dismantling their traps. In this state, Enkidu represents a kind of primordial innocence, a life before society, before knowledge, before sorrow. He is humanity in its most natural, uncorrupted form. His existence is first discovered by a trapper whose livelihood is ruined by Enkidu's actions. The trapper, terrified by this powerful wild man, goes to his father, who advises him to seek help from the great king Gilgamesh in Uruk. This is the first link in the chain that will draw Enkidu out of the wild. Gilgamesh, hearing of this potent natural force, devises a plan that is quintessentially Mesopotamian. He does not send soldiers to capture or kill Enkidu. Instead, he sends a temple prostitute, a shamhat, a woman dedicated to the goddess Ishtar. Gilgamesh's instructions are specific. The shamhat is to go to the watering hole, wait for Enkidu, and reveal her feminine charms to him. When Enkidu sees her, he will be drawn to her, and his animal companions will then reject him. The plan works perfectly. The shamhat, whose name means the joyous one, meets Enkidu at the water's edge. For 6 days and 7 nights they engage in lovemaking. This extended sexual encounter is the primary agent of his transformation. It is through this act, an experience utterly alien to the animal world, that Enkidu gains wisdom and consciousness. The epic states, "He had wisdom, broader understanding." But this newfound knowledge comes at a great cost. When Enkidu, his passion sated, tries to return to his herd, the animals flee from him. The gazelles, his former family, now see him as other. He has lost his connection to the natural world. He tries to run with them, but his knees buckled. His speed is gone. He has lost his animal strength and his primordial innocence. The shamhat tells him, "You have become wise, Enkidu. You have become like a god. Why did you roam the wilderness with beasts?" She invites him to Uruk, the great city, where Gilgamesh resides, promising him a new life. Enkidu's transformation continues as the shamhat civilizes him. She divides her garment and clothes him. She brings him to a shepherd's camp, a transitional space between the wilderness and the city. Here, Enkidu encounters bread and beer for the first time. He is confused, used to sucking milk from wild animals. The shamhat encourages him. "Eat the bread, Enkidu. It is the staff of life. Drink the beer. It is the custom of the land." He eats until he is full, drinks 7 goblets of beer, and his heart expands. He becomes cheerful, washes his matted body, anoints himself with oil, and puts on clothes. He became like a man, the text says. He takes up a weapon and hunts lions and wolves, now protecting the shepherds from the very world he once belonged to. He has completed the transition from protector of wild animals to protector of humanity. He finally travels to Uruk, his destiny now fully entwined with Gilgamesh. His entry into the city is as a challenger. He blocks Gilgamesh's path as the king is on his way to exercise his tyrannical right to sleep with a new bride. The ensuing wrestling match in the city square is not just a fight between 2 men. It is a symbolic collision of nature and civilization. When Gilgamesh wins, the conflict is resolved, and their legendary friendship is born. Enkidu's role now shifts. He becomes Gilgamesh's conscience and companion. He is the one who tries to dissuade Gilgamesh from the hubristic quest to kill Humbaba, having known the monster's terror from his time in the wild. "I knew him, my friend, in the hills. The forest is vast. Humbaba, his voice is the deluge, his speech is fire, his breath is death." Yet he is loyal and follows his friend into the perilous adventure. Throughout their quests, Enkidu often provides the caution and grounding that the arrogant Gilgamesh lacks. He is also the one who interprets Gilgamesh's dreams, giving voice to the will of the gods. His death is the pivotal moment of the entire epic. It is a direct result of their shared triumphs and transgressions, the slaying of Humbaba and the bull of heaven. The gods' decision to punish Enkidu instead of Gilgamesh is a tragic irony. The civilized man, the king,
is spared, while the once natural man, now fully enmeshed in the world of human ambition and divine politics, must pay the ultimate price. His death is not just a personal loss for Gilgamesh, it is the death of the innocence Gilgamesh himself lost long ago. Enkidu's story is a profound meditation on the human condition as understood by the Mesopotamians. It suggests that civilization is a one-way street. Once you have tasted its knowledge, its comforts, and its complexities, you can never truly go back to a state of nature. This process brings great gains: friendship, love, wisdom, purpose, but it also brings great losses: innocence, freedom, and a connection to the natural world. Ultimately, it brings an awareness of mortality. Enkidu, the wild man, had to become civilized in order to experience friendship, and it was that friendship and the heroic deeds that inspired that led directly to his very human death, setting the stage for Gilgamesh's final, desperate quest to overcome it.
Humbaba, the cedar forest, and the wrath of the gods. Every great hero needs a great monster to conquer, and for the newly united Gilgamesh and Enkidu, that monster was Humbaba. The quest to the cedar forest to slay this terrifying guardian is the first great adventure of the two heroes, an episode that showcases their courage and hubris and sets in motion the tragic chain of events that will define the rest of the epic. This is not simply a monster hunt. It is a deliberate transgression into a sacred, forbidden realm, a direct challenge to the authority of the gods. The cedar forest was a mythical place, likely inspired by the cedar-rich mountains of Lebanon to the west of Mesopotamia. For the people of the flat alluvial plain, these vast, timber-filled mountain forests were a place of awe, wealth, and danger. Cedarwood was a highly prized luxury good, essential for building temples, palaces, and boats. The forest in the epic, however, is more than just a source of timber. It is a sacred domain, the land of the living, ruled over by the sun god Shamash, but guarded by a creature appointed by the great god Enlil himself. It is a place of divine power, not meant for mortals. The guardian of this forest is Humbaba, or Huwawa in older Sumerian versions. He is a creature of immense and terrifying power. Descriptions of him are chilling. He is a giant, his roar is like a flood, his mouth is fire, and his breath is death. He is depicted as having a monstrous face, with features contorted into a grimace like a mask of terror. In some descriptions, his face is made of coiled intestines. He wears 7 auras, or terrors, layers of fearsome radiance that paralyze any who would approach him. He is the personification of the terrifying, untamed power of nature, a being of primordial force placed in the world by the gods to protect a sacred space. Gilgamesh's decision to hunt and kill Humbaba stems from his restless energy and his dawning awareness of mortality. Before he is truly terrified by death, he seeks to conquer it symbolically by achieving immortal fame. He declares, "I will set up my name where the names of famous men are written." He frames the quest as a noble endeavor, to defeat an evil and bring back precious cedar wood for Uruk. Enkidu, who knows the forest from his wild days, is horrified by the plan. He tries to dissuade Gilgamesh, warning him of Humbaba's inescapable power. But Gilgamesh is adamant, shaming Enkidu for his fear and rallying him with promises of glory. Their preparation for the journey is extensive. They commission blacksmiths to forge enormous weapons, axes weighing 3 talents each, over 180 pounds, and swords of equal weight. They consult the elders of Uruk, who, like Enkidu, warn against the quest, but ultimately give them their blessing. Crucially, Gilgamesh appeals to the sun god Shamash for protection. Shamash, who has a soft spot for the hero, agrees to help him, promising to lend him the power of the great winds to use against Humbaba. This divine aid is critical, but it also complicates the matter. Gilgamesh is undertaking a quest that defies the will of one major god, Enlil, while being aided by another, Shamash. This highlights the internal politics and rivalries within the Mesopotamian pantheon. The journey to the cedar forest is arduous, taking them over 7 mountains. As they approach the forest's edge, Gilgamesh has a series of terrifying nightmares. In each dream, he sees himself crushed by a mountain, battling a wild bull, or witnessing fiery destruction. Enkidu, acting as a dream interpreter, consistently puts a positive spin on these omens, reassuring Gilgamesh that they foretell victory. Whether Enkidu truly believes this, or is simply trying to bolster his friend's courage, remains ambiguous. When they finally entered the cedar forest, the sheer awe and terror of the place overwhelmed them. They stand in silence before the towering cedars and hear the distant, terrifying roar of Humbaba. As the monster confronts them, he taunts them, mocking Enkidu for betraying his natural kin and leading Gilgamesh to his doom. Gilgamesh is momentarily paralyzed by fear, but Enkidu's encouragement and a powerful word from the heavens from Shamash restore his courage. The battle is titanic. Humbaba unleashes his 7 terrifying auras, but Shamash intervenes, summoning the 13 great winds, the north wind, south wind, whirlwind, storm wind, and unleashes them from all directions. The monster is blinded, immobilized, and unable to advance or retreat. He is trapped. Seeing his guardian defeated, Humbaba pleads for his life. He flatters Gilgamesh, promising to be his servant and to give him all the trees in the forest. Gilgamesh is moved and considers showing mercy, but Enkidu, ever the pragmatist, urges him to finish the job. He warns that a freed Humbaba will surely seek revenge and that they must kill him now to secure their fame and safety. "Do not listen to him," Enkidu cries. "Show him no mercy." This moment is a crucial turning point. The decision to kill the helpless guardian, who was only doing the job assigned to him by the Enlil, is the height of their hubris. Gilgamesh, with Enkidu's help, strikes the monster, and with a final blow, they sever his head. Their victory is immediate and absolute. They have defeated one of the world's great terrors. They chop down the sacred cedars, fashion a massive door for the temple in Nippur as a sign of piety, and float it down the Euphrates back to Uruk with Humbaba's head as a gruesome trophy. They return as conquering heroes, their fame seemingly secured forever. But their triumph is hollow. They have disturbed a sacred order. The slaying of Humbaba deeply offends Enlil, the lord of wind and earth. He is enraged that they have killed his appointed guardian and defiled his sacred forest. While Shamash's protection shields them for a time, this marks them. It is their first great sin, a crime of arrogance against the divine plan. This transgression, compounded by their subsequent slaying of the Bull of Heaven, is what directly leads to the gods' council and their decree that one of the 2 heroes must die. The wrath of the gods, specifically of Enlil, is not swift and fiery, but cold and calculated. They choose to punish the duo by breaking their perfect friendship, by taking Enkidu. The glorious victory in the cedar forest, the very act that was supposed to grant them immortal fame, becomes the direct cause of the loss and sorrow that will haunt Gilgamesh for the rest of his life. The quest demonstrates a core Mesopotamian belief that even the greatest human achievements are fraught with peril, and that defying the will of the gods, no matter how heroic the deed, ultimately leads to ruin.
Utnapishtim, the Mesopotamian Noah and the Great Flood. Within the Epic of Gilgamesh lies a story so ancient and powerful that it is echoed through civilizations for millennia.
It is the tale of a global deluge, a divine plan to wipe out humanity, and a single man chosen to survive and preserve life on Earth. When Gilgamesh, desperate for the secret to eternal life, finally reaches the shores of the distant world where the immortal Utnapishtim lives, he is told this very story. The tale of the Great Flood is not just a detour in Gilgamesh's quest, it is one of the oldest and most complete versions of a myth that would later find its most famous retelling in the biblical story of Noah. Utnapishtim, whose name means "he who found life," begins his tale by taking Gilgamesh back to a time long before his own, to the ancient city of Shuruppak on the banks of the Euphrates. The world, he says, had grown old and humanity had become too numerous. Their clamor and noise disturbed the sleep of the great gods, particularly the powerful and short-tempered Enlil, king of the gods. Annoyed and disgusted by mankind, Enlil persuaded the divine assembly to a terrible solution, to destroy all of humanity with a great flood. The gods swore an oath of secrecy, sealing the fate of the world. However, one god did not agree with this plan, the wise and cunning Ea, or Enki, the creator and protector of mankind. Bound by his oath not to speak directly to any mortal about the plan, Ea devised a clever way to circumvent his promise. He went to the hut where Utnapishtim, a devout and righteous man, lived. Instead of speaking to Utnapishtim, Ea spoke to the wall of the hut, knowing his chosen man was on the other side. Reed hut, wall, wall. Listen, reed hut, and pay attention, wall. Man of Shuruppak, son of Ubar Tutu, tear down your house and build a boat. Abandon your possessions and seek life. Forsake your belongings and save your life. Through this ruse, Ea relayed the secret of the impending doom and provided specific, detailed instructions for survival. Utnapishtim was to build an enormous vessel, an ark. The dimensions Ea provided were extraordinary. Its length, width, and height were to be equal, creating a perfect, massive cube. It was to have 7 decks, each divided into 9 compartments. It needed to be sealed inside and out with bitumen and pitch to make it waterproof. The sheer scale of the project was immense, and Utnapishtim, feigning madness to his neighbors, had to explain his actions. Ea advised him to tell the people that he had incurred the wrath of Enlil and was sailing away to the Apsu, the domain of his patron god Ea, promising that once he was gone, Enlil would shower them with riches. The people, tragically, believed him and even helped him build the boat. Utnapishtim then loaded the ark with all of his worldly possessions. He brought aboard his gold, his silver, and most importantly, the seed of all living things. He gathered his family, his kin, and also a collection of craftsmen, smiths, artisans, and shipwrights to preserve the knowledge of civilization. He brought aboard the beasts of the field, both wild and tame. Finally, as the sun god Shamash, who was in on the plan, set the appointed time, Utnapishtim entered the ark and sealed the door behind him. The cataclysm began at dawn. A black cloud rose from the horizon. The storm god Adad thundered from within, and the heralds of the storm, Shulat and Hanish, swept over the land. The Anunnaki, the great judges of the underworld, put the land to the torch. The world was plunged into a terrifying chaos of wind and water. The storm was so violent and so total that even the gods themselves were terrified. The epic describes them cowering in fear in the highest heaven of Anu, huddled together like dogs. The goddess Ishtar, the mother of humanity, shrieked in anguish. "How could I have commanded such evil in the council of the gods? I have commanded a war to destroy my people. I myself gave birth to my people, and now they fill the sea like fish." The gods wept with her, lamenting their rash decision. For 6 days and 7 nights, the wind blew and the floodwaters submerged the world.
On the 7th day, the storm abated. Utnapishtim opened a hatch and looked out. All was quiet. The landscape was flat, and all of humanity had turned to clay. He fell to his knees and wept. The great ark came to rest on the peak of Mount Nasir, or Nemush. It remained there for 7 days. To test if the waters had receded, Utnapishtim began to send out birds. First he released a dove. It flew away, but found no place to land and returned. Then he released a swallow. It too returned. Finally, he released a raven. The raven flew off, saw that the waters had subsided, found food, and did not return. Seeing this, Utnapishtim knew it was safe. He opened the doors and released all the animals back into the cleansed world. He then built an altar on the mountaintop and made a sacrifice to the gods, offering sweet-smelling incense. The gods, starved for the sustenance of sacrifice which they had been denied, gathered like flies around the offering. Enlil, however, was furious when he arrived and saw the ark. He realized that some humans had survived his decree. "What living thing has escaped? No man was to survive the destruction," he raged. It was Ea who stepped forward, confessing his role and rebuking Enlil for his disproportionate punishment. "How could you, without reflection, bring forth the flood?" Ea argued. "On the sinner impose his sin. On the transgressor impose his transgression. But be lenient, lest he be cut off." Ea argued for justice, not annihilation. Enlil's anger subsided. He seemed to recognize the wisdom in Ea's words and the piety of the man who survived. In a grand gesture of reconciliation, he came aboard the ark. He took Utnapishtim and his wife by the hand, helped them to their knees, and touched their foreheads in blessing. He declared, "Hitherto Utnapishtim has been but human. Henceforth Utnapishtim and his wife shall be like us gods. Utnapishtim shall reside far away at the mouth of the rivers." With that, Utnapishtim and his wife were taken to this distant paradise-like place and granted eternal life. This is the story he tells Gilgamesh. The crucial point is that his immortality was not something he earned or achieved through a quest. It was a unique, one-time gift from the gods, a consequence of extraordinary circumstances that could never be repeated. It serves as the ultimate proof to Gilgamesh that his own quest for eternal life is doomed to fail. Utnapishtim's story is a monument within the epic, a powerful myth that explores themes of divine wrath, human piety, destruction, and renewal. It is a testament to the Mesopotamian understanding of the precariousness of human existence, forever dependent on the whims of capricious and all-powerful gods.
The Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, is more than just a story of a divine war. In its 7 tablets, it lays out a complete and detailed blueprint of the universe as the Mesopotamians understood it. This is their cosmology, their science, and their theology, all woven into a single grand narrative. The epic's primary goal is to demonstrate how the chaotic, formless world of Apsu and Tiamat was transformed into a stable, organized, and hierarchical cosmos under the unquestioned authority of the god Marduk. The creation of the physical world, detailed primarily on tablets 4 and 5, is an act of divine engineering and cosmic legislation. The process of creation begins immediately after Marduk's victory over Tiamat. With the monstrous mother of chaos lying dead at his feet, Marduk does not annihilate her. Instead, he uses her very substance as the raw material for his new world. This is a fundamental concept in Mesopotamian thought. Order is not created from nothing, but is imposed upon pre-existing chaos. Marduk, standing over the colossal corpse, he plans his creation. He splits her body into 2 halves, like a shellfish.
The first half he uses to create the heavens. He raises it up and fastens it into place, creating a great celestial dome or canopy. This canopy serves a crucial function. It holds back Tiamat's upper waters, the chaotic cosmic sea that once filled the universe. He sets a boat and stations guards, giving them a strict command never to let these waters escape. This act creates a safe, dry space for the world to exist, forever protected from the threat of a heavenly deluge. This celestial barrier forms the sky. Beneath this canopy, Marduk lays out the Eshara, a grand celestial structure that is a counterpart to the Apsu, the freshwater ocean below. This heavenly mansion becomes the dwelling place for the three great gods of the old order. Anu, the sky god, is given the highest heaven, Enlil, the storm god, the middle air, and Ea, Marduk's father, the waters below. By assigning them these stations, Marduk is both honoring them and subtly confirming his superior authority over them. He is the architect, and they are now residents in his creation. Next, Marduk turns his attention to organizing time and space. He creates the constellations, setting up stellar representations of the gods to mark their positions in the heavens. This is the birth of astronomy and astrology, which were inextricably linked in the Babylonian mind. The stars were not just random lights, they were divine beings, and their movements were a form of celestial writing, a way for the gods to communicate their will to humanity. He then establishes the calendar, a cornerstone of civilization. He designates the moon god, Nanasin, to be the master of the night and to mark the passing of the days and months with his phases. He defines the year and sets the pole star to guide the others. He creates the gates on the eastern and western horizons through which the sun god, Shamash, will travel each day. This precise ordering of the celestial bodies transforms the sky into a giant divine clock, providing a predictable rhythm for agriculture, festivals, and daily life. With the heavens established, Marduk turns his attention to the other half of Tiamat's body to create the earth. While the text is less detailed here, it is understood that this lower half forms the terrestrial world. He then uses other parts of her body for more specific features. From her head, he heaps up the mountains, likely the Zagros Mountains to the east of Mesopotamia. From her eyes, he causes the two life-giving rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, to flow. The placement of her head in the east explains why the sources of these rivers were located there. From her venom-filled glands, he creates the fog and clouds. He has tamed her monstrous attributes and repurposed them into natural phenomena. The Mesopotamian cosmos that emerges from this process is a highly structured, three-tiered universe. At the top is the sky, the celestial canopy holding back the waters of chaos. In the middle is the flat, disc-shaped earth where humanity lives, and below the earth is the Apsu, the great freshwater ocean, the realm of the god Ea, which feeds the rivers and springs. The entire structure is seen as a kind of cosmic state. Heaven is the king's palace, and earth is the domain of his subjects. This brings us to the final and crucial act of creation detailed on Tablet 6, the creation of humanity. The gods, having been assigned their stations and duties in Marduk's new order, begin to complain. They are grateful to be saved from Tiamat, but they are still burdened with the labor of maintaining the universe. It is here that Marduk conceives of his ingenious plan. He will create a lesser being, a savage race, to take over the gods' work. I will create a savage, Man shall be his name, Marduk proclaims. He shall be charged with the service of the gods, that they might be at ease. The creation of humanity requires a special divine ingredient, but also a tainted one. Marduk decides to use the blood of Kingu, Tiamat's vanquished general and consort, the one who plotted the uprising. Kingu is held accountable for the cosmic rebellion, executed, and his blood is mixed with clay by the wise god Ea. From this mixture of divine but treacherous blood and mundane earth, the first human, called Lulu, is fashioned. This origin story is profoundly revealing of the Mesopotamian worldview. Humanity is not the pinnacle of creation made in God's image. Instead, humans are an afterthought, a biological robot created for the sole purpose of servitude. Our existence is defined by toil, to dig the irrigation canals, to harvest the grain, to weave the cloth, to offer the sacrifices of food and drink that the gods need to sustain themselves. This cosmology justifies the hardships of life. Life is difficult because that is what humanity was designed for. It also establishes the absolute necessity of religious ritual. The temples, the ziggurats, the constant offerings, these were not just acts of piety. They were the literal fuel that kept the cosmic engine running and the gods happy. Finally, in gratitude for being relieved of their labor, the Anunnaki gods build a magnificent home for Marduk on earth, the city of Babylon itself, with its great temple, the Esagila, and its towering ziggurat, the Etemenanki. Babylon becomes the terrestrial center of the universe, the link between the Apsu below, the earth, and the heavens of Anu above. The 7 tablets of creation, therefore, do more than tell a story. They present a complete and coherent model of the universe, one that explains its physical structure, the passage of time, the nature of the gods, the purpose of humanity, and, most importantly, the divinely ordained supremacy of Marduk and his city, Babylon. It is a cosmos born of violence, defined by hierarchy, and maintained by labor.
In the flat, sun-drenched landscape of ancient Mesopotamia, certain structures dominated the horizon, testaments to both human ingenuity and divine ambition. These were the sacred temples and their towering platforms, the ziggurats. These were not merely places of worship in the modern sense. They were the literal homes of the gods on earth, the epicenters of cosmic power, and the engines of the Mesopotamian economy. To understand the ziggurat is to understand the very structure of Mesopotamian society and its relationship with the divine. The heart of every Mesopotamian city was the temple complex. This was a vast, walled precinct dedicated to the city's patron deity, Enlil in Nippur, Enki in Eridu, Inanna in Uruk, Marduk in Babylon. The temple itself, the bitu, or house, was considered the actual dwelling place of the god or goddess. The divine presence was embodied in a cult statue, an idol meticulously crafted from precious materials like wood, ivory, gold, and lapis lazuli. This statue was not a mere symbol. The Mesopotamians believed that through a special ritual of opening the mouth, the spirit of the deity came to inhabit it. Life within the temple mirrored the life of a royal court. The cult statue was treated like a living king or queen. Each day, the priests, who were the god's personal servants, would awaken the statue with morning hymns. They would wash it, dress it in fine linen and jewelry, and serve it 2 elaborate meals a day on a golden table. The food, consisting of bread, meat, fruit, and beer, would be offered to the statue, which would mystically consume its essence. The physical food was then distributed among the temple staff and the king, a sacred meal shared with the deity. The god had a bedroom for resting. a courtyard for receiving visitors, and was even taken on processions through the city on special festival days, riding in a ceremonial boat or chariot to visit other gods or bless the city's inhabitants. The temple was a place of constant, meticulous ritual, all designed to keep the resident god happy, comfortable, and well-disposed towards the city. But the temple was far more than a divine residence. It was the single largest economic institution in the Mesopotamian world. The temple owned vast tracts of agricultural land, enormous herds of cattle and sheep, and workshops for weaving, pottery, and metalworking. It functioned like a massive corporation, employing a huge portion of the city's population, from priests and scribes to farmers, herders, and artisans. The grain, wool, and other goods produced on temple lands were collected, stored in massive storehouses within the precinct, and then distributed as rations to the temple's workers. This system, known as a redistributive economy, was one of the earliest forms of centralized economic planning. The temple scribes, using the new technology of writing, kept meticulous records of every commodity, every worker, and every transaction on clay tablets, making the temple the birthplace of accounting and bureaucracy. Rising above the temple complex, and indeed the entire city, was the most iconic architectural form of ancient Mesopotamia, the ziggurat. The ziggurat was not the temple itself. It was an artificial mountain, a massive, stepped pyramid-like structure built of mud brick with a small temple or shrine at its very summit. Its name comes from the Akkadian word zikkuratu, meaning to build on a high place. These structures could be colossal. The famous ziggurat of Ur, built around 2100 BCE, was 210 by 150 feet at its base. The Amenanki, the ziggurat of Marduk in Babylon, was even larger, possibly reaching a height of 300 feet, making it one of the wonders of the ancient world. The purpose of the ziggurat was profoundly symbolic. In the flat topography of southern Mesopotamia, it created a man-made mountain, a connection point between the terrestrial world of humans and the celestial realm of the gods. It was an axis mundi, a cosmic axis that linked heaven, earth, and the underworld. A series of grand staircases led up its face, allowing the priests, and perhaps the king, to ascend towards the heavens. This journey upwards was a ritual passage, moving from the profane space of the city to the sacred space of the divine. The shrine at the top was a holy of holies, a waiting room for the gods, a place where the divine could descend to meet with humanity, or where priests could receive divine messages. The Greek historian Herodotus described the shrine atop the ziggurat of Babylon as containing a large ornate couch and a golden table, but no statue. He was told that the god himself would come down and rest there. The ziggurat was a visual manifestation of the city's power and its devotion to its patron god. Its construction was a massive state-sponsored project requiring immense resources and labor, a way for a king to demonstrate his piety and might. The story of its construction was often inscribed on foundation cylinders buried within its core. King Ur-Nammu of Ur declared, "For Nana, lord of the city, I have built his temple, the Atemen Eniguru, house whose foundation is clad in terror. I have brought it to completion." The most famous ziggurat in history is, of course, the Amenanki in Babylon, which is widely believed to be the inspiration for the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. The name Amenanki means the house of the foundation of heaven and earth, perfectly capturing its cosmological significance. The story in the book of Genesis of a united humanity building a tower to reach the heavens out of arrogance, leading God to confuse their languages, is a fascinating reinterpretation of the ziggurat's purpose. While the Babylonians saw it as a pious act of connecting with the divine, the Hebrews, who were exiled in Babylon, likely saw this massive,
pagan structure as an act of supreme human hubris, a symbol of their captors' arrogance. The ziggurats and temples were therefore the undisputed centers of Mesopotamian life. They were places of religious ritual, political power, economic organization, and architectural marvel. They were physical representations of the cosmic order described in the myths, a hierarchical world where humanity served the gods who lived in splendor in their houses on earth. They were stairways to heaven, built not of stone, which was scarce, but of the mud of the riverbanks, a testament to the civilization's ability to raise monuments of enduring power from the very earth they inhabited.
While Inanna's descent gave us a glimpse into the Mesopotamian underworld, the land itself had its own permanent, fearsome rulers. The land of the dead, known as Kur or Irkalla, was not an empty void, but a highly organized kingdom, a dark reflection of the world of the living, with its own queen, its own laws, and eventually its own king. The story of its rulers, Ereshkigal and Nergal, is a tale of divine insult, violent conquest, and a union born of fury and passion that forever cemented the leadership of the land of no return. The primordial ruler of the underworld was the goddess Ereshkigal, whose name means Queen of the Great Below. She is the older sister of Inanna or Ishtar, and where her sister represents the vibrant, dynamic forces of life on the surface, Ereshkigal embodies the static, grim finality of death. She is the absolute monarch of her domain, a place described as a house of dust and darkness, from which no traveler can ever return. In the Descent of Inanna, she is portrayed as suspicious, jealous, and powerful, rightfully enforcing the unalterable laws of her kingdom. She is not evil in the modern sense. She is a personification of the natural, inevitable process of death. Her rule is absolute, her judgments are final, and her realm is one of sorrow and shadow. For a long time, she ruled alone, a solitary queen in a kingdom of the dead. But she would not rule alone forever. Her consort, Nergal, was a god whose character was perfectly suited to the grim realities of the underworld. Nergal was a major deity in the Mesopotamian pantheon, associated with a terrifying array of calamities. He was the god of plague, pestilence, fever, and sudden death. He was also a god of war, but not the glorious, heroic aspect of battle that Ishtar represented. Nergal was the god of the scorched earth, of the horrors of the battlefield after the fighting had been done, of the infection and disease that swept through armies and cities. His sacred city was Kuta, and he was also associated with the destructive, scorching heat of the midday sun in summer. He was a divine executioner, the wrath of the gods made manifest. If Enlil decreed destruction, Nergal was often the one who carried it out. He was, in short, a god of all the things that send people to the underworld prematurely. The story of how these two fearsome deities came to rule together is a masterpiece of divine drama, told in tablets found at Amarna in Egypt and in later Assyrian versions. The myth begins with a grand banquet held by the gods in the heavens. All the major deities were invited. However, Ereshkigal, as queen of the underworld, could not ascend to the celestial realm, just as the sky gods could not descend to hers. To bridge this gap, she sent her vizier, Namtar, whose name meant fate or destiny, and was also a demon of disease, to the banquet to collect her portion of the feast. When Namtar arrived in the divine assembly, all the gods stood up to show him respect as the emissary of the great queen. All, that is, except one, the proud and powerful Nergal. He remained seated, a grave insult to both the vizier and his queen. When Namtar returned to the underworld and reported this slight, Ereshkigal was enraged,
Her authority had been challenged. She demanded that the offending god be sent down to her so that she could kill him. "The god who did not rise before my messenger," she commanded, "bring him to me, that I may put him to death." The gods, not wanting to anger the fearsome queen further, identified Nergal as the culprit. But Nergal was a powerful god in his own right, and was not about to go to his death willingly. The wise god Ea, Enki, came to his aid. Ea knew that Nergal could not defeat Ereshkigal by pure force within her own realm. He advised Nergal on a strategy of cunning and brute force combined. Ea gave Nergal a set of instructions for how to behave in the underworld to avoid falling under its spell. He was told not to accept any food or drink, not to wash his feet, not to use the anointing oil, and most importantly, not to be seduced by Ereshkigal when she disrobed before him. To aid him in his confrontation, Ea also gave him 14 demonic helpers, duplicates of underworld demons, to station at each of the gates to hold them open for a potential escape. Following Ea's advice, Nergal descended. Some versions of the myth say he stormed the gates, overwhelming the gatekeeper Neti and his demonic helpers. When he finally reached the throne room, he was filled with rage. He grabs Ereshkigal by her hair, drags her from her throne, and prepares to behead her. But what happens next is a shocking twist. In that moment, with a sword at her throat, Ereshkigal breaks down. She weeps and pleads for her life, making an astonishing offer. "Do not kill me, my brother," she cries. "Let me speak a word to you. Be you my husband, and I will be your wife. I will let you hold dominion over the wide underworld. I will place the tablet of wisdom in your hand. You shall be the master. I will be the mistress." Nergal, overcome by this offer, and in some versions by a sudden passion for the fearsome queen, hesitates. He drops his weapon, and they kiss. He accepts her offer. For 6 days they make love, consummating their violent courtship. However, on the 7th day, Nergal, perhaps remembering Ea's warning or fearing he would be trapped forever, slips away and uses his demonic helpers to escape back to the heavens, leaving Ereshkigal alone once more. When Ereshkigal awakens to find her new husband gone, she is devastated and enraged. Her vizier Namtar finds her weeping, not just for the insult, but for the loss of her consort. She sends Namtar back up to the heavens with a furious and heartbroken ultimatum for the gods. "The god whom you sent, your son, has lain with me and has now departed. I am unwashed, and he is gone from me. If you do not send him back, I will raise up the dead, and they will eat the living. I will make the dead more numerous than the living." This is the ultimate threat. A zombie apocalypse, a complete upending of the cosmic order. Faced with this terrifying prospect, the gods have no choice. Nergal is commanded to return to the underworld, this time for good. He descends once more, but this time not as a conqueror, but as a husband returning to his wife and his throne. The myth ends with them laughing and embracing as he takes his place beside her. This story serves several purposes. It explains how the formidable Ereshkigal came to have a male consort. It cements Nergal's role as a Chothonic deity, a lord of the dead, and it creates a powerful divine partnership. Ereshkigal represents the state of being dead, the passive nature of the underworld, while Nergal represents the active causes of death, plague, war, and disaster. Together they form a complete picture of the Mesopotamian understanding of mortality. Theirs is a reign born of violence, passion, and political necessity, a fittingly dark romance for the grim rulers of the land of no return.
Divine Kingship, the God Kings, and the Mandate from Heaven. I am the shepherd of the people, the one chosen by the great gods. These are the words not of a deity, but of a mortal king, Hammurabi of Babylon. In the world of ancient Mesopotamia, the line between the divine and the mortal, especially when it came to royalty, was thin and often deliberately blurred. The concept of kingship was not a political invention. It was a divine institution, a sacred office lowered from heaven to earth. The king was the crucial intermediary between the gods and humanity, a pivotal figure whose personal piety and just rule determined the fate of his entire nation. The Sumerian king list, one of the most remarkable documents from the ancient world, lays out this ideology clearly. It begins, "When kingship was lowered from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu." The text presents an unbroken chain of succession, listing kings and the lengths of their reigns, stretching back into a mythical antediluvian past where rulers lived for tens of thousands of years. The list's purpose was to show that kingship was a single, continuous institution, passed from one city to another as ordained by the gods. A city's political dominance was a reflection of its divine selection. This document was pure propaganda, designed to legitimize the current ruler by placing him at the end of a long and sacred lineage. The primary role of the Mesopotamian king was to act as the chief servant of the gods. They were his chosen steward on earth, responsible for maintaining cosmic order within his kingdom. This meant that his duties were as much religious as they were political or military. The king's most important job was to build and maintain the temples of the gods. Royal inscriptions are dominated by accounts of temple construction and restoration. By providing a magnificent home for the city's patron deity, the king ensured the gods' favor, which in turn would bring prosperity, good harvests, and military victory. The king was also the chief priest, expected to participate and oversee the most important religious festivals, such as the Akitu New Year festival in Babylon. In the sacred marriage rite, the king would symbolically couple with a priestess, representing the goddess Inanna or Ishtar, a ritual believed to guarantee the fertility and abundance of the land for the coming year. The king was also the guarantor of justice. The gods were believed to be the source of all law and justice, and they delegated the implementation of this justice to the king. The sun god, Shamash or Utu, who could see everything that happened on earth, was the ultimate god of justice. The famous law code of Hammurabi depicts the king standing reverently before Shamash, receiving the symbols of royal authority, the ring and the rod, which represent his divinely granted power to establish law and order. The prologue to the code makes this explicit. Anu and Enlil named me, Hammurabi, the exalted prince, the worshipper of the gods, to make justice prevail in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evil, to prevent the strong from oppressing the weak. The king's law was the god's law, and to disobey the king was to challenge the divine order itself. While the king was the god's chosen representative, the question of his own divinity was complex and evolved over time. For most of Mesopotamian history, the king was not considered a god himself. He was a mortal man who had been elevated to a sacred role. However, there was a brief but significant period, starting with Naram-Sin of Akkad in the 23rd century BCE, where kings did claim divinity. Naram-Sin, after a series of great military victories, declared himself a god of Akkad. He had himself depicted wearing a horned helmet, an attribute previously reserved only for deities. This was a radical and audacious move. Later, the kings of the third dynasty of Ur, such as Shulgi, also claimed divine status and were worshipped with their own temples and cults. This practice of deifying the living king was actually the exception rather than the rule. It was a risky political move that could be seen as supreme hubris. A famous tale, The Curse of Akkad attributes the downfall of Naram Sin's glorious empire directly to his arrogance and his desecration of the temple of Enlil in Nippur. After the UR3 period, the practice largely died out. Kings like Hammurabi reverted to the more traditional model, the pious servant, the chosen shepherd of the people, not a god in his own right. He was divinely ordained, but mortal nonetheless. The king's relationship with the gods was a delicate and constant negotiation. He had to discern the divine will through omens, dreams, and prophecies. Before any major undertaking, be it starting a war, building a temple, or even appointing an official, the king would consult diviners. They would inspect the entrails of sacrificial sheep, observe the movements of the stars, or interpret celestial phenomena. A negative omen could halt a military campaign or a construction project in its tracks. The king's success and the well-being of the entire state were believed to depend on his ability to correctly interpret these divine signs and act accordingly. This mandate from heaven was not permanent. It was conditional on the king's performance. If a king was impious, unjust, or failed to perform his ritual duties, the gods could withdraw their favor. This would manifest as famine, plague, military defeat, or natural disaster. A major catastrophe was often interpreted as a sign of divine anger towards the ruler. This belief system provided a framework for understanding and explaining political change. If a dynasty fell and was replaced by another, it was not seen as a mere political or military event, but as a divine judgment. The gods had simply withdrawn their support from the old king and bestowed it upon a new, more worthy candidate. The ideology of divine kingship was a powerful tool for maintaining social and political stability. It placed the king at the center of the cosmos, making him the linchpin that connected the human and divine worlds. His authority was absolute because it was divinely sanctioned. To rebel against the king was to rebel against the gods themselves. This system, in which religion and politics were completely fused, created a powerful and enduring model of governance that defined Mesopotamian civilization for 3,000 years. The king was the shepherd, and his people were the flock, guided and protected by the staff of divine authority.
In the divine drama of Mesopotamia, wars were fought not just with weapons, but with a unique and powerful object that served as the ultimate source of cosmic authority. This was the Tupi Shimati, the Tablet of Destinies. This was no ordinary clay tablet. It was a divine artifact, a master document upon which the fates of gods and mortals were inscribed. To possess the Tablet of Destinies was to hold the power to command the universe, to decree reality, and to hold the legitimate title of King of the Gods. The story of this tablet, its theft and recovery, is a recurring theme in Mesopotamian myth, representing the constant struggle for power and the precarious nature of divine order. The concept of destiny, or Shimtu, was central to the Mesopotamian worldview. Fate was not a vague or abstract force. It was a specific decree, a sentence pronounced by the gods that determined the course of a person's life, a city's future, or the functioning of the cosmos. The Tablet of Destinies was the physical embodiment of this power. It functioned like a divine computer's master program, or the ultimate legal document of the universe. The god who held it had the executive authority to determine fates and ensure that the universe operated according to their will. In the earliest traditions, the tablet was the rightful possession of Enlil, the powerful Sumerian god of wind and earth, and the king of the pantheon. His temple in Nippur, the Ekur, was seen as the place where fates were decreed. This reinforced his position as the supreme ruler of the cosmos. The tablet was both a symbol of his authority and the very instrument of it. As long as Enlil held it, the cosmic order was stable and his rule was unquestioned. However, the very existence of such a powerful object created an irresistible temptation for those who craved power. One of the most famous myths revolving around the tablet is the story of the Anzu bird. Anzu was a massive, monstrous bird-like creature, sometimes depicted as a lion-headed eagle, who served as a guard in Enlil's throne room. Day after day, Anzu watched Enlil perform his rituals, bathing and setting aside his crown, his divine robes, and the Tablet of Destinies. A treacherous thought grew in Anzu's mind. If he could steal the Tablet of Destinies, he could usurp Enlil's power and rule the gods himself. I will take the Tablet of Destinies of the gods for myself, and I will command the orders of all the gods, he schemed. Seizing his opportunity while Enlil was distracted, Anzu snatched the tablet and flew away to a remote mountain hideout. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. With the tablet gone, the divine order collapsed. Stilled were the divine commands, the myth states. The radiance was taken away, silence prevailed. The universe ground to a halt. The gods were thrown into panic. They had lost their executive function, their ability to run the cosmos. The gods desperately sought a champion to defeat Anzu and recover the tablet. They first turned to Adad, the storm god, then to Gira, the god of fire, and then to Shara, the son of Ishtar. But all of them refused, terrified of the power Anzu now wielded. Anzu, armed with the tablet, could turn back any attack simply by decreeing it. He could order a weapon to fall apart in midair or an arrow to return to its bow. He was seemingly invincible. Finally, the gods turned to a young heroic god, Ninurta, the son of Enlil, and a mighty god of war and the hunt. Ninurta, armed with his divine weapon, the Sharur mace, and supported by the counsel of the wise god Ea, agreed to face the monster. The ensuing battle was immense. Ninurta's initial attacks were useless, just like the other gods had feared. His arrows were turned back by the power of the tablet. But with Ea's strategic advice, Ninurta changed his tactics. He used the winds to clip Anzu's wings, and in the moment the bird was grounded and vulnerable, Ninurta unleashed a barrage of weapons, finally slaying the beast. He recovered the Tablet of Destinies and returned it to his father Enlil, restoring order to the universe. Ninurta's victory cemented his status as a great divine hero and reaffirmed Enlil's legitimate rule. This myth served as a powerful allegory for political rebellion. Anzu is the usurper who illegitimately seizes power. Ninurta is the loyal son, the legitimate force that restores the proper order. The story reinforces the idea that authority must be held by the rightful, divinely appointed ruler. The Tablet of Destinies is as the central prize of a cosmic conflict in the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish. In this later narrative, the tablet's role is strategically repurposed to legitimize the rise of Marduk. When the primordial mother Tiamat prepares for war against the younger gods, she creates her general Kingu, and in an act of supreme confidence, she bestows the Tablet of Destinies upon him, fastening it to his breast. She gave him the Tablet of Destinies, she fastened it on his breast, saying, "Your command shall not be countermanded, the utterance of your mouth shall be established." With this, Kingu is made the new, albeit illegitimate, king of the universe. This act is what makes the threat of Tiamat's rebellion so profound. It's not just a physical battle, it's a struggle for cosmic legitimacy. When Marduk confronts Tiamat's forces, his primary goal after slaying the great dragon mother is to capture Kingu and seize the tablet. The epic states, "He vanquished her host, and Kingu her leader. He took from him the Tablet of Destinies, which was not his rightful possession, and sealed it with his own seal, and fastened it on his own breast." This moment is the climax of Marduk's rise to power. By seizing the tablet, he takes control of fate itself. He becomes the new Enlil, the new supreme ruler of the cosmos, not by birthright, but by right of conquest. His possession of the tablet is the ultimate proof of his victory and the source of his authority to create the world anew. The ultimate act of the gods in the epic, where they bestow upon him 50 names, is a formal recognition of the power he already holds by possessing the tablet. The Tablet of Destinies is therefore one of the most potent symbols in Mesopotamian mythology. It represents the belief that the universe is not random, but operates according to a defined plan and a clear chain of command. It personifies the concept of supreme authority, making it a tangible object that can be held, fought over, lost, and won. It underscores the precariousness of that authority and the constant need to defend the established order against the forces of chaos and rebellion, a theme that resonated deeply in the often turbulent political world of ancient Mesopotamia.
Mesopotamian demons and spirits, Pazuzu, Lamashtu, and apotropaic magic. The world of the ancient Mesopotamians was not only populated by great gods and goddesses in the heavens, it was teeming with a host of supernatural beings, demons, ghosts, and spirits that inhabited the dark corners of the world and the shadowy recesses of the human mind. These entities were not distant, abstract forces. They were an ever-present reality, the direct cause of sickness, misfortune, and death. For the average person, dealing with this invisible world of demons was a far more immediate and pressing concern than worshiping the great god Marduk and his temple. This required a different kind of religion, the practical, defensive art of magic. It is crucial to understand that the Mesopotamian concept of a demon was different from the modern Judeo-Christian one. They did not have a single overarching figure of evil like Satan, nor was there a clear-cut cosmic war between good and evil. Instead, the supernatural world was a chaotic and morally ambiguous place. Demons were not necessarily evil in a philosophical sense. They were simply agents of chaos and suffering, performing their natural function as dictated by the gods or the cosmic order. Some of the most feared demons were those who preyed on the most vulnerable. Chief among these was Lamashtu, the daughter of Anu. She was a terrifying female demon, often depicted with the head of a lioness, the teeth of a donkey, and the talons of a bird, suckling a pig and a dog at her breasts. Lamashtu was the terror of pregnant women, mothers, and infants. She was believed to sneak into the houses of new mothers to kidnap or kill their babies, either in the womb, during birth, or in the cradle. She was also blamed for causing miscarriages, stillbirths, and infant fevers. She represented the terrifyingly high rate of infant mortality in the ancient world, a divine scapegoat for an inexplicable tragedy. There were also the Utuku, a class of spirits that could be either good or evil who roamed the desert wastelands. The evil Utuku were responsible for causing various diseases and afflictions. The Galu demons were the bailiffs of the underworld, the terrifying entities who dragged the souls of the dead down to the realm of Ereshkigal, as seen in the Descent of Inanna. Another feared figure was the Lilitu, a female demon of the desolate wilds who was believed to prey on men and was associated with sterility and impotence. This figure is a clear precursor to the later Jewish figure of Lilith. Given this constant threat from a myriad of malevolent forces, the Mesopotamians developed a sophisticated system of defense, apotropaic magic, meaning magic intended to turn away evil. This was not considered witchcraft or a dark art. It was a necessary and legitimate form of spiritual medicine, often practiced by specialized priests known as the ashipu or exorcist. The primary weapon against demons was the incantation. The ashipu would perform complex rituals that involved reciting powerful, poetic texts that would identify the demon, describe its evil deeds, and then command it to depart in the name of a powerful god, usually Ea, the god of magic, or his son Marduk, the great demon slayer. These spells were often accompanied by ritual actions, such as creating a figurine of the demon and then destroying it, symbolically destroying the demon's power. Another key tool was the amulet. People would wear small charms, often made of stone or metal, inscribed with protective symbols or images of powerful beings. These were meant to act as a constant shield against demonic attack. Similarly, protective figurines were often buried in the foundations of houses or placed near doorways to act as supernatural guardians. images of divine beings called Apkallu, wise sages, often depicted as fishmen or griffin demons, or the benevolent bullmen, were thought to ward off evil spirits. Perhaps the most famous of these protective demons is a figure who, despite his horrifying appearance, was often invoked for protection. Pazuzu. Pazuzu is a terrifying hybrid creature with a canine or leonine head, bulging eyes, a scaly body, the talons of a bird of prey, and 4 wings. He is often shown with his right hand raised and his left hand pointing down, a gesture of power. While he was considered a bringer of famine and drought, his power was so great that he could also be used to drive away other, more malicious demons. In particular, Pazuzu was the arch-enemy of the baby-snatching Lamashtu. This is a key concept in Mesopotamian magic, fighting fire with fire. Amulets bearing Pazuzu's head were frequently hung in the rooms of pregnant women and newborns. The idea was that when Lamashtu approached the house, she would see the image of her powerful rival, Pazuzu, and flee in terror. A famous bronze statuette of Pazuzu in the Louvre bears an inscription on its back. "I am Pazuzu, son of Hanbi, king of the evil wind demons. It is I who rage mightily in the mountains, that I might be seen. Against me there is no other." Invoking his name and image was a way of co-opting his terrible power for a protective purpose. Another fascinating artifact of this magical practice is the incantation bowl. These were simple clay bowls, common in Mesopotamia during the later Sasanian period, but continuing a much older tradition. The inside of the bowl was covered in a spiraling text, usually written in Jewish Aramaic, Syriac, or Mandaic. The text was a long and powerful spell, a legalistic argument against a specific demon or affliction, invoking angels, gods, or other powerful names. The bowl was then buried upside down under the floor of a house. The logic was that the demon, rising from the earth, would be trapped under the bowl, forced to read the spiraling spell over and over for eternity, thus neutralizing its threat. The world of Mesopotamian demons and spirits reveals the daily anxieties of ancient life. Sickness was not a biological process, but a demonic assault. A stillbirth was not a medical tragedy, but the work of Lamashtu. A sudden fever was the touch of an evil Utuku. In a world without scientific explanations for suffering, magic and ritual provided a sense of agency. It gave people the tools to fight back, to name their fears, and to appeal to a higher power for protection, turning their homes into fortresses against the ever-present forces of chaos that lurked just beyond the firelight.
The role of priests, omens, and divination in daily life. How can mortals know the will of the gods? In a world where divine favor could mean the difference between a bountiful harvest and a devastating famine, or a glorious victory and a humiliating defeat, this was the single most important question for the people of Mesopotamia, from the king in his palace to the farmer in his field. The universe was not silent. The gods were constantly communicating their intentions. The challenge was to read the signs. This was the sacred science of divination, a complex and all-encompassing practice that governed every aspect of Mesopotamian life, and the specialists who could interpret this divine language were the priests. The priesthood in Mesopotamia was not a single monolithic role. It was a highly specialized and hierarchical profession. At the top were the high priests and priestesses, Inu and Entu, who served the chief deity of a city's main temple. These were often members of the royal family, a way to solidify the bond between the palace and the temple. Below them were a vast array of different priestly classes, each with specific duties. There were the Shangu, the temple administrators who managed the vast economic holdings of the god's estate. There were the Kalu, the lamentation priests, who were experts in the sacred music and hymns needed to soothe the hearts of angry or grieving gods. But for the practice of divination, 2 types of priests were paramount, the Baru and the Ashipu. The Ashipu, as we've seen, was the exorcist and magician, the expert in defensive magic against demons and witchcraft. The Baru, on the other hand, was the diviner, the seer, the specialist who could interpret divine messages in the world around him. The Baru's primary role was to answer specific questions posed by a client, most often the king. Before any important decision, a Baru would be consulted to determine whether the signs were favorable. The Mesopotamians believed that the gods could write their messages in almost anything. Divination could be spontaneous or provoked. Spontaneous omens were unsolicited messages from the gods. These could be anything from the birth of a deformed animal. If a ewe gives birth to a lion, the king will have no rival. To the behavior of a bird in flight, the pattern of oil poured on water, or the meaning of a dream. There were massive collections of omen texts compiled over centuries that listed thousands of these potential signs and their interpretations. For example, if a gecko falls on a man's bed, that man will have a rival. These texts were a vast encyclopedia of cosmic cause and effect, an attempt to find order and meaning in the seemingly random events of the world. The most important and prestigious form of divination, however, was provoked. This was extispi, the examination of the internal organs of a sacrificed animal, usually a sheep. The Mesopotamians believed that when a question was asked of a god and an animal was sacrificed, the god would write the answer upon the animal's organs. The liver, being a large, complex, and blood-rich organ, was considered the most important site of divine communication. The Baru was a highly trained expert in reading the liver. He would examine its size, shape, color, and the presence of any unusual markings, holes, or discolorations on its various lobes and parts. This practice was so standardized that they created detailed clay models of sheep livers for training purposes. These models are covered in cuneiform inscriptions, labeling each part of the liver and noting the meaning of different signs. A mark on a specific part might foretell an attack from the east. Another might predict the death of the king or a successful harvest. A perfect or healthy liver indicated a positive answer from the gods, while a deformed or diseased one was a dire warning. This was not seen as superstition, but as a rigorous empirical science. The Baru would compile a detailed report for the king, often noting multiple, sometimes contradictory signs, before offering a final judgment on whether it was safe to proceed. Another major field of divination was astrology, which developed into a sophisticated science in the hands of Babylonian and Assyrian priests. These astronomer priests, often working from the top of ziggurats, meticulously charted the movements of the sun, the moon, the 5 visible planets, known as wild sheep for their wandering paths, and the constellations. They believed that the heavens were a celestial tablet upon which the gods wrote the destiny of the nation. The movements of celestial bodies were not just physical phenomena, they were omens on a grand scale. An eclipse of the moon, which was associated with the king, was especially terrifying omen, often portending his death. In such cases, the Mesopotamians developed a remarkable ritual, the Shar-Puhi, or substitute king. When a lunar eclipse was predicted, the real king would go into hiding. A substitute, often a criminal or a person of low status, would be placed on the throne, dressed in royal robes, and treated as the king. The hope was that the evil foretold by the omen would fall upon the substitute. Once the danger period had passed, the substitute king was executed, and the real king would emerge from hiding and reclaim his throne, having successfully cheated fate. This demonstrates the deadly seriousness with which they took their celestial omens. The role of priests and divination permeated every level of society. While the king consulted the Baru for matters of state, common people would seek out lower-ranking diviners for more personal questions about business, health, or family. Divination provided a sense of control and understanding in a capricious world. It was a system that connected the smallest occurrences, the shape of a smoke plume, the appearance of a mushroom, to the grandest destinies of kings and empires. It was the operating system of the Mesopotamian mind, a way of constantly monitoring the lines of communication with the divine powers that governed every aspect of their existence. Without the priests to interpret these signs, the world would have been a terrifyingly silent and unpredictable place.